to the webinar. My name is Barry Canty, and I am SVP of Marketing at ibex. I want to thank you for joining us. Today's conversation is driving hypergrowth CX with business intelligence. And we're going to discuss the importance of mining BI data to drive and sustain your CX as you scale your brand. Super excited to have two veterans of the CX industry with us today. First up is John Kearney of Zendesk. John is VP of Customer Advocacy at Zendesk. How's it going today, John?
Great. It's good to be here.
So for context, maybe you could give our audience a little bit of background about your CX career and what you do for Zendesk.
Absolutely. So I've spent my entire career providing customer service and support, or in some customer service and support role, whether it was with the government in downtown Washington, D.C., Microsoft, Salesforce, and or now Zendesk. So it's a great place to be, and I love making sure that customers are happy.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. The next up is Doug Hopschwelle. Doug works with us here at ibex, and he is GM and SVP of Business Development. Hey, Doug.
How you doing, Barry? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Also, maybe a little bit of background and some information about your work here for ibex.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry since I joined in the mid-90s. Got started way back, so it's a couple decades ago. And most of my journey, so it's always been on the BPO side and the CX side. And most of my time is pretty equally split between business development and client services. Those are the roles that I've been part of. Been part of ibex for the last 4 years. And my focus is helping ibex with our go-to-market strategy for the world's, I think, coolest, most disruptive new economy brands. So we're excited to be part of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. So today's presentation is the first entry in the WaveX Technology Partnership series that we're producing here at ibex. WaveX is the CX technology platform from ibex. WaveX features homegrown solutions and a partner ecosystem to help enable a better customer experience. Quick check of our agenda. We're going to open with the age of digital CX and focusing on the metrics that matter the most. We'll flow through to address how to act and measure some of the data that you're deriving from your BI activities, and also talk about the pitfalls. And then we'll wrap up with some best practices specifically for hypergrowth brands and touch on a few case studies that we've developed here over our time at ibex. Really quickly, guys, before we jump in, just one housekeeping item. I encourage everyone to submit questions throughout the conversation. We'll pause and respond to your questions, and then we'll leave some time at the end also to answer. And then a recording of this presentation will be emailed out to everyone who registered, whether they attended or not. You can view that again or share it with your colleagues. So let's go ahead and dive into our first topic. In the age of digital omni-channel CX, John, what metrics do you think matter the most?
Yeah, I think some of the mainstays that I would think that drive the customer experience, obviously the top and foremost is customer satisfaction. They'll tell you immediately if their experience has been great or if it could be improved, and they're not shy about letting us know that. I think some of the other things that we look at is NPS. What's important there, looking at making sure we're delivering on any SLAs, service level agreements, so that we're meeting customer expectations in the time that they would expect us to respond. And then escalations, how customers have to escalate issues for more visibility or urgent issues that's important to them.
All right. And Doug, in terms of the metrics clients typically rely on. What's your take?
Yeah, I think so. I do see a lot of those as well. NPS, CSAT, and then I see a lot of focus as people move upstream. Because those are kind of outputs, right? Things that will add value and eliminate the concerns around that. So moving towards resolution metrics that I think we'll talk about as well, whether it's issue resolution, first call resolution. But it also really depends on what your focus is. It depends on what part of the customer experience you're on. Is this part of sales? Is this part of customer care? Is this part of tech support? So those vary, because sales might be a revenue per call. It might be a conversion rate. So there's different elements, and it just really depends on what your core focus is for that part of the customer journey.
Thanks. And we had a question that came in during registration. I'll pose it to both of you, but I think it's appropriate for this portion of the conversation. The question is, my team is currently focused on tracking 10 metrics. Is that too many, or is that not enough?
You can certainly try, and I think it depends, right, on a lot of things. My experience has taught me that simplicity helps in most cases, and I've seen that have a lot of success. A good example is one of our clients has a really clear focus where they want the best outcome in CSAT to ensure the best outcome in NPS. They actually moved away from CSAT to focus on DSAT first, because their whole strategy was, let's eliminate DSAT and all that remains would be CSAT. But as they used analytics and dug down into that, they understood that resolution was a key component of that, or that actually repeat call rate was the biggest driver. And so they kept moving back up, but they stayed focused. They changed and pivoted, but they stayed focused on a more singular set of metrics to ensure the outcome that they want.
Got it. Got it. John, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I totally agree with Doug. It really depends. In my experience, you can have too many or too few. If you have too many, basically you focus on the ones that are most important, and you let the other ones fall by the wayside, because ultimately they just show that they're not as important to what you're trying to achieve. Or if you have too many, it could be you end up focusing on the tyranny of the urgent. You get one metric up and the other one down, and you got to figure out which ones we want to influence the most. And it also depends on what you're trying to measure. If you're just trying to measure and keeping things simple, as Doug mentioned, that's the best approach. But if you're trying to look at the customer journey across everything that's going on from the customer experience, you might have more than 10. So I think it does matter. There should be balance, but keep it as simple as possible.
Okay, thanks, guys. So let's jump to the next area of the conversation, and it's around data challenges that are common for hypergrowth brands. And Doug, I'll come to you first with this one.
Sure.
What are some of the challenges you've seen when it comes to analytics and BI for these hypergrowth brands?
Yeah, it's a good question, Barry. I mean, if you just think about, hypergrowth it's really a culture of bringing on customers at this white knuckling pace to begin with. I'm dating myself here a bit, but it kind of reminds me of that classic Lucille Ball candy conveyor belt scene. But that's what they're going through. It's just, we're so fast. We're just bringing customers in. And so you have to have the ability first to get your arms around that customer experience and understand what the journey looks like, so that you balance bringing in the customer with your ability to retain the customer. And I really like what Wadad Nasoli says. Wadad's our global head of customer success and business insights. And she'll recommend resolution metrics like issue resolution, or more appropriately, first contact resolution, because it does two things in that scenario. One, it's going to help control demand and reduce contact volume. But second, is, as we just talked about a minute ago, issue resolution is at the heart of preserving a customer when they contact you, solve their problem. So you get two things: you control the volume, you retain that customer. As they're coming out so fast, I think that's a really good focus.
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally with what Doug is saying. And I would say some of the pitfalls that I've run into in my experience is knowing what you're measuring and then verifying that it's accurate. Different people can have different interpretations of what you're measuring and what it means to them. So if you clearly define it and then you're tracking it and then you're verifying that what you're tracking is actually the right measure and it's the accurate measure, then it won't be misleading and you won't have confusion in what you're communicating to the organization about the customer experience. So I would say that's probably one of the major ones.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So guys, we've set the table so far. We've talked a little bit about the metrics that matter, some of the challenges that hypergrowth brands face. Let's jump into how to measure and act on these data insights. And whoever wants to respond to this first, feel free. What do you think is the proper starting point to make effective data-driven decisions?
Great. I'll just start by saying you need to know what the mission, vision, and values of your company are, and then make sure that your metrics align to that in terms of your growth and customer experience. You could be measuring or tracking the wrong things that don't align with where the company is going. And in my mind, that would be a misdirection or fail, right? So as long as what you're doing is consistent and what you're measuring dovetails into the mission, vision, and values, then I feel like everybody will be driving to the same thing around the customer experience and success.
John, I couldn't agree more. That is so well put. I think having that not just corporate alignment, but brand alignment, because as a BPO, we want to be a true extension of that brand. So the more we understand our brand, our client's strategy, and how, and really the why behind the metrics we're chasing, and understand it helps us so much. I think we're really good at teaching what and how. And I'm seeing a lot of partners get a lot better at teaching us why and making sure that we are aligned and that does cascade down. I think that's really important. That's a great one.
And we talked a little bit earlier as we were preparing for this about customer effort. John, maybe you can touch on the importance there.
Yeah, I think customer effort, it's definitely trending in the industry. And if you look on different trade publications or digital publications, TSIA is a good one. They'll talk about customer effort. And in my estimation, customer effort is reducing the friction it takes for a customer to interact with your business, your company, and getting the information or assistance that they need with the least amount of effort possible to make it easy and simple for them. So in other words, from a support perspective, if we're really focused on customer effort, we want them to be able to submit their incident or ticket or whatever assistance they need, whatever we're going to call the system that we use, and that they submit that one time, and that we do all the effort. We take on the effort as a support organization to make sure that we're following up with the customer regularly, giving them the updated action plan, et cetera, so that they're not having to continually ping us or reach out to us for, hey, where are we going? When is my issue going to be resolved? As Doug talks about the resolution metrics, which are very important, but the least amount of effort possible is the best customer experience.
That sounds good. And oh, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that, because I think, John, you do such a good job of framing that up. I think customer effort, it's interesting, since I think it was Matt Dixon at CES released, that was a game changer to me for the industry. And they released the effortless experience. And now I'm acutely aware of when I'm in a situation myself as a customer, when I'm required to do something that I perceive I shouldn't be required to do that. And it's just, but I think the one we always think about too is you call in somewhere and through the platform, you're entering information, my account number, my information, whatever. You finally get to that human and they ask you to repeat yourself. Mm-hmm. That's more effort. Those are things like that we're just more aware of now, that I think customer effort is really, really important. So Barry, thanks for bringing that one back up.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. You're welcome. And then, Doug, when we are first engaged with a hypergrowth brand and they're kind of rifling through the data points that they should focus on, how do you help them sort of narrow their focus to an individual data point or a short list of data points?
Yeah, well, it backs up to it starts with what we were just talking about a minute ago is, hey, what are your company's core values? What's the strategy? How do you support? How does your customer care, customer support, sales organization support that? And then what are the metrics out of that? And what I tend to recommend and look for and strive for is what's the North Star? What's the metric that we're all marching to that at the end of the day, we know this is going to add that most value back up through that, through that brand. And I think having a clear understanding of what that North Star is helps a lot. I think it helps align us. Again, we're trying to be an extension, a full extension of your brand. Really in our engagement with customers, we're not trying to be ibex. We're trying to be that brand, and having that understanding is really valuable.
Yeah, thanks for, and John, North Star, in your opinion, the importance of it.
Yeah, North Star in my mind is, where do you want to get to? Where is the journey that you're on as a company going to take you that you feel like this is the best experience possible and this is where we need to arrive? So in other words, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, right? So in other words, it's not where we want to be today. So how are we going to determine what metrics that we're going to implement, the iterations and the goals that we'll set in order to get us to where that North Star is? And you may be looking at different metrics initially and then change as you get through your plan and understand, well, maybe we should focus on this other area that's important and review these things quarterly and set your targets accordingly to say, starting here, this is where we want to be. Here's the metrics we're aligning to. We may add one, take one away, but ultimately you want to get your journey to where you want to end up, especially for your customers. And ultimately customers will tell you if you've arrived in that sense. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. And just to pause for a minute for our audience, if you have any questions about, identifying your North Star, please feel free to submit those now. We'll respond. I'd love to hear your thoughts here for those of you who are perhaps struggling with finding what that single data point should be. Next question for you guys. When you think of solutions, BI solutions for hypergrowth brands, any advice on the types of solutions they should be leveraging?
Yeah, I'll start here. And again, I mentioned with Dad, and our internal customer success and business insight teams has a full platform and understanding. It's a combination of technology and amazing resources and experience and expertise they leverage. We've leveraged things like complexity studies, value stream mapping, solutions like that to help drive customer solutions. A good example is the complexity studies help us understand, help our customers understand, hey, which of these interactions can we potentially segment over to self-help or automation? Which of those can we segment to a new higher population that requires less training versus those that are more complex and need to be retained with higher skilled or higher tenured? And then you look at value stream mapping, where that can be a very large process like a SIPOC, and you look across everything, but we actually collapse that down to even just looking at a call flow and looking at, hey, what are the elements of a call that aren't adding value, in extracting those out and making that interaction more efficient and more valuable to the customer. So what you do is you make them more efficient by reducing the time it takes to help the customer, and it's a better experience. So, but it's using those solutions, those platforms, to grind into that data and find out how we can help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll add from my experience, there's different things that you can track from a metric standpoint that is important for the customer experience. So one is a near real-time view of what's going on with the customer at any point in time, and I work mostly on the support side. So in other words, how quickly are we picking up tickets or issues to respond to customers as quickly as possible? What is our responsiveness time? What are we doing? How long is it taking us to get an issue resolved? So first time or first touch resolution. And some of that you can pick up right on the fly and you can manage it. We have Explore in Zendesk that we use to help with the near real time information to get a good sense of what's going on with the customer experience throughout the day. But then there's the lagging indicators that you can look at in terms of, what's the customer effort? What's the customer satisfaction results? What are the data points that you will track and then analyze afterwards? And there's different tools out there depending on what you want to use. SQL is good if you want to use that as a platform for data. Tableau is great if you want to use a platform for reporting. But all of those, depending on where you're at and what your budget is, will help you understand what you're going to stand up. But also, you need to have a really good data analyst, somebody who can help pull that data and make sense of it for you so that you're looking at the numbers and making informed decisions based on the data that you get.
Thanks. And, guys, one of the often overlooked data streams that we haven't talked about yet is social. Any thoughts on how to leverage the data that's coming in via social channels?
Doug, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, thanks. No, absolutely. And John, in our conversations, and getting to know you, I like how you framed up, social. So it's a listening system, and customers are always interacting with you, whether you realize it or not. So using social media as a great way, as a useful way to interact with your customers is really important. But I think you have to have a thoughtful strategy of how to listen to them and how to respond to them. Now, ibex has a platform where we're able to do that, right? We're able to scrape all the different social media platforms, look at how your customers are interacting with you, what they're saying, can provide those insights, and we can even manage those interactions directly from that platform. But I think regardless of what platform you're using, I think it's important to connect with people in these social media platforms and not set them aside. It's something where people are certainly a lot more prevalent today.
Yeah, again, correct on the social listening system. It's really understanding the temperature of what customers are telling you about your product or your services. And a lot of times we all gravitate to the negative, right? We want to understand what the customer experience is, and they'll tell us very loudly when something's not working. And that social listening system can help us identify those areas, and we can go after them depending on what the issue is and how quickly we can respond. The other piece is using that social listening system to celebrate when we're doing things right, and saying, hey, we're moving in the right direction, and customers are telling us that. And it's a good indicator to help us get that temperature and say, okay, great, we're heading in the right direction. Customers are telling us that. And then all that helps with branding. Obviously, we want to be able to reinforce our brand and communicate to customers all the things that we're doing and to have a positive impact on their experience. And they'll tell us through our the social media channels that we're monitoring.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'd love to, for a moment, Doug, if we could just drill in on one of the solutions or types of solutions that you referenced earlier. Mm-hmm. The solution is value stream mapping. So give our audience an understanding of why a fast-growing brand should engage in a value stream mapping exercise.
Well, so there's a lot of different uses to that. They said from a macro view, it can be organizing the entire customer journey, right? You take a SIPOC view of something. And I think that's really useful. Back to the point where I was saying at Hypergrowth, we're taking a customer so fast, getting your arms around and understanding what this intended customer journey, the intended customer experience can look like, can reveal and help reveal what are the elements of the journey, current or future, that are valuable and which are maybe not so valuable. What are things that are waste that we want to pull out? And the example I gave earlier is it can be taken from that macro view to a micro view. We're looking at individual interactions And you can use that same process to eliminate waste from any type of workflow to have a more efficient and productive experience.
Thanks. And just out of curiosity, we didn't talk about this as we prepped, but John and Doug, when you're first engaging with one of these hypergrowth brands who perhaps has not followed the advice that we're giving now, what is the reaction typically like after you've compiled all this data? Are they defensive about the information that they've uncovered? What sort of responses do you usually get?
Gratitude. Yeah. That's the best part of this job, candidly.
Yeah.
Especially for someone who's been in client services, and my counterparts in client services to tell you, that's where we want to be. And it goes back to the whole purpose of sharing the why behind what you're trying to do and helping us understand. So when we have full extension, when we're able to get access to data, we're able to analyze it, we're able to impact your business in a possible way to help you grow, to help you remove costs, to help you learn something about your customers, help you become more loyal, and customers react with great gratitude. It's the best part of this job. It really is.
Awesome. Yeah, and in my experience, it's more about the aha moments where you show them the information, you show them the way in a sense, and they say, "Man, I wish we'd have thought about that differently, or I wish we'd have done something differently, or I wish we would have taken that route." And it helps them have those conversations where they need to take them up the chain to say, "Hey, we need to pivot on a few things and set the course for direction so that we can drive the right and best experience for our customers."
Oh, thanks, guys. And then just one more question around KPIs and how they've evolved over time. John, I'll come to you first with this one. What are the go-to metrics brands should be using today?
There's several, obviously some of the things that we mentioned, but one of the ones that I think is important that we typically avoid, and again, it's really around looking at the entire customer journey and their experience throughout their interaction with us. So looking at how the customer starts by going to our web portal, are they getting the information that they need? Are they able to interact with us as smoothly and seamlessly as possible? And then getting the service that they need from us from that standpoint. So I think customer effort is something that needs to be on the radar for a KPI that needs to be tracked, that not many, from what I understand, not many have implemented yet for customer service and support. I do think you'll probably find that the sales team innovates more on the customer effort aspect, just because they're trying to generate that pipeline, which is valuable for any company.
And Doug, what are your thoughts?
So Barry, I'm going to ask you to restate the question. Sorry, I just want to make sure I have the right context.
So I'll read it as it is on the page.
Okay.
How about that? So the question is, how have KPIs evolved over time, and what are the go-to metrics hypergrowth brands should be using today?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, Barry. I think that KPIs have evolved, and John, you talked about CES, and I mentioned Matt Dixon's book that kind of I thought was a game changer for the industry, and you can't assume that they are. I think I've seen more differentiation in channels in how we interact with customers. And that's just changing demographics, technology, things like that. We talked about social a minute ago. I would prefer to be on chat all day long, because I like to live in a world of and. I can be solving a problem in a chat, and I can keep doing this over here. And so I've seen more evolution, I think, in channel experiences than the metrics. Some of the key metrics are still pretty consistent today. They were 10 years ago and such. I'm not seeing a big, huge change in metrics.
And I'll add a couple more thoughts here as I think about it. So one is, I think, especially from the customer service and support, that's where most of my experience is that time to resolution. I know Doug referred to this earlier in resolution metrics, but I think the best experience possible when a customer has an issue is going to be one that's the fastest response and resolution that we can provide. Customer sat will always be high depending on how quickly we can resolve the issue. It tends to taper off and go lower the longer it takes for us to resolve it. So what are we building within our teams to get that quick customer resolution to their issue? To me, that's one of the key important ones that we need to look at that will help.
Yeah, I'd support that. It makes me think back, I mean, most of support interactions are outcomes of an unintended customer experience, if you really think about that. And so ultimately, it's the same today as it was 10 years ago, as it was 20 years ago. When a customer contacts you, solve their problem. That's it. That will do more good than anything else.
Absolutely.
One of the KPIs that we have not brought up yet is DSAT. How important should that be to brands?
Yeah, I'll start here. And I mentioned that a little bit. And again, we've got a client of ours that, and I'm very upstream in my nature, how I think about things. So this really appeals to me, that they trust the process of driving CSAT as an experience by focusing on eliminating DSAT. So they focus on that, but they started with the journey, okay, we're going to trust this process and set CSAT aside. We're going to focus on DSAT. But then they got into the data, looked at the analytics, and said that, hey, the biggest drivers of DSAT is repeat calls. And so, again, that's back to John's, it's back to customer effort, right? I got to do this again. Well, let's scrub, let's analyze, and lo and behold, resolution is the key focus there. So it's now focusing on issue resolution to eliminate recalls, to eliminate DSATs. And that's the process. And they're trusting that over time, through that process, what the outcome will be a great CSAT.
Yeah, and I'll add for dissatisfaction, I look at that as an opportunity as another listening system. So when you look at the feedback that customers will provide, it can be across a breadth of different things. It may not just be the support experience. So you took too long to resolve my issue, right? Obviously, you're trying to drive the resolution metrics, but it could be simply the product didn't work the way I wanted it to, or it didn't have the feature. So that's a way to provide feedback to product and engineering to say, hey, can we change this to drive a positive customer experience? It could be that a customer had no other avenue to get something handled for them. Let's say it was a billing issue or it was a non-support issue that they gave us feedback on, saying, hey, support was the only place that I could go to get help. They tried to redirect me to the right place, or they tried to solve it. I'm not happy about it, that experience. So I do look at the DSAT piece, where how can you manage out most of the things that you can positively impact?
That's good.
And then be the listening system for customers within the organization where you can influence, like the product teams or billing teams or the finance teams, things where you can improve their overall experience just because you have the information and they're just telling you. If it's related to support, we know what we can focus on, pick the top things and get that number, that DSAT number, as low as possible to provide the best experience possible. We didn't, in some cases, depending on how you measure SAT, there's the top box and there's the bottom box. And we don't even, sometimes we don't even look at the middle box. What's the middle ground? And then that's more of a mediocre customer experience. So how can we move more of those middle boxes to top box in that sense?
Yeah, John, I'll add in to that. It's an interesting discussion. I'd love to hear from people here on what their thoughts are, because I've experienced a multitude of strategies. And the same thing applies to NPS. There's a lot of people that said, hey, you can't move detractors, focus on the passives. And it's interesting philosophy, whether you believe that or not, or, hey, do we want to focus on, like in that measurement of CSAT, which is top box, do we work on the next two boxes, or do we work on eliminating the bottom? That's a philosophy and a strategy. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, that's a good reminder. First of all, please continue to submit questions. And during that portion about KPIs, we did have two come in. So I'll throw them your way now. The first question is, how can BI help us effectively manage large CX volumes?
Yeah, I'll start here because it goes back to the point I made, and I keep stealing with Ad's genius, and we're gonna have to get her on one of these clearly. But I've heard her say it over and over when she talks to the clients. And again, and you're in that hyper growth state. Things are moving so fast. Narrow your focus, focus on resolution. First contact resolution helps you eliminate repeat calls. It just helps you eliminate repeat calls, which helps eliminate volume, and it helps you retain customers because you solve their problems.
Yeah, I would agree. You have to be able to grow at scale. And typically the growth overruns your capacity because you're growing really fast. And so the BI is going to tell you different things where, hey, what's the high volume, low complexity kind of issues that we can solve through content, or that we can solve through automation, or that we can solve through making that information available to customers through another means, so that what you're working on are the difficult issues that customers can't resolve unless they have human interaction or interaction with your team. So you've got to be able to survive and look at what BI is telling you, and then strategize around, okay, so what can we do to help drive this experience so that we can focus on the top issues where our human capital's most invested, and we can use automation and content to help deflect issues with the growth. So you can grow at scale.
Thanks. And then one more question that's come in. It's around average handle time. And the question is, how useful is it as a metric these days?
Average handle time is still a relevant metric. I know that when you look at a phone system, the traditional phone system, average handle time was something, a metric that was easily reported on. But I think even in today's world, when you look at how long it takes from the customer to submit a case or a ticket for assistance, and how long it takes us to get to that ticket, the more you can reduce that time and be responsive to customers, again, the better off their experience is going to be. So I think it's still very valid and relevant in today's world, and one of the things that we look at Zendesk.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really relevant because, look, we're still in a model where, hey, again, a lot of these interactions are happening, or unintended parts of the experience. So efficiency is important, and it comes with a cost that we want to, I think, optimize or minimize as much as possible. But in AHT, and this is important, AHT is a metric you want to optimize. It's not one you can go too long for sure, right? But you can actually go too short and hurt the customer experience as well. And that's where that value stream mapping can be really helpful to help you optimize the ideal interaction, let us eliminate waste, and focus on what's the target AHT. Let's optimize it. Think of it more as actual to optimal, as opposed to, hey, are we bringing down AHT? No. Are we nailing AHT? I think because you have to understand what's the desired handle time, what's the desired experience supposed to look like, and that'll be a good framework for understanding what the handle time should be.
Yeah, you actually spurred my memory on something too here, Doug. Is that I think as you measure that, you have to understand that customers will wait a bit longer to get to the person that will solve their issue quickly. So you have to kind of measure it and see what the right AHT time would be, because again, you can make that very quick, as Doug stated. But if you're not going to be able to resolve the issue, or that issue has to bounce to someone else, it's only going to frustrate the customer. So the sweet spot would be how we can get the right handle time, and making sure that customer gets the person that will resolve, or the resource that will resolve their issue as quickly as possible. And then they'll be happy. They'll be happier.
Yeah, thanks. guys, and thank you for submitting a question. Please continue to do so. Let's jump into our final section of the conversation, and it is BI best practices for hypergrowth brands. So we'll start with you, John. Any key best practices that you'd recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I have 10 metrics. Is that too many or too little? I would say focus on the ones that are most important. And the terminology is don't boil the ocean. You can't do it all, right? Focus on the ones that are most important. And as your business continues to scale and grow, add the ones that continue to help solidify or crystallize where you're heading, so that you're doing things in a very phased and planned approach versus we're going to have all these metrics and we're going to try to figure out which one is going to be the urgent one of the day to focus on. That doesn't help your staff and it doesn't help where you're trying to drive. So be consistent in what you're measuring and pick the ones that make the most sense.
Doug, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, again, we've touched along the way some of those that I've seen, and let me plug again, having a set of KPIs and metrics that cascades from your core values and strategy. It's so important to drive an alignment through a brand all the way through to your partner. If you can explain the why, help us understand how this is valuable to your internal core values, to your internal core strategy. It allows us to become a closer part of your brand and be more effective as well. I think that's really, really useful.
Sounds good. And any advice from either of you about, how to work with a BPO, how to work with a CX technology advisor such as Zendesk?
Well, John, I'll let you into Zendesk and then I'll talk BPO.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just say one of the things that I think is a strategy for us is really to come out and tell customers and tell the industry how we're leveraging our platform to deliver on what we do. I don't think we tell the story enough. And I think there's a lot of valuable information that says we are customer zero. And as we understand the experience ourselves and help to change the product, we want to go through that so that we can advise and help customers implement some of the same things that we've done for their success. So, stay tuned for that. It's something that I look forward to doing at some point, but we want to take customers through our journey and how we leverage it and be a trusted advisor for what they're trying to implement in their own companies with Zendesk.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and I think from BPO, my advice is to find an experienced partner who can meet you where you are in your stage of growth, especially as a new economy, hyper-growth brand. When we started building our go-to-market strategy, 4 years ago, Bram Wigzell and I, we had this vision of, hey, we want to build something that by partnering with ibex, your chance of success greatly increases. Your business plan is more likely to be successful, no matter where you are, whether you're a startup, whether you're kind of a mid-tier disruptor or a global enterprise operator. And I'm really proud of the fact that there's probably 4 brands in the last year that we're sole partners with that have gone IPO and gone public. And so we feel like, hey, and I reached out to Bram. I'm like, hey, this is exciting. We're seeing what was intended. And so I think it's finding someone that understands where you are and has the demonstrated experience to go with that journey, not just at the beginning, but as you scale, that you don't need a new sophisticated experienced operator when you scale and you become that global enterprise brand, someone that can go with you all along the way.
Yeah, it's like the sweet spot has the BPO worked with non-hypergrowth brands who are maybe more focused on labor arbitrage? And do they have experience working with hypergrowth brands who know how to help scale a business? So I think that's some good advice. One of the things we chatted about as we were prepping is the importance of channels and how to prioritize channels and evaluate the data that you're receiving from those channels. John, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. In today's age, there's so many ways that customers would prefer to interact with any company that you need to consider. So you want to be able to add the channels that customers want to leverage. Again, when we talk about effort, if we talk about journey, if we're forcing them into a channel that they don't want to leverage, they have to use it and it'll just frustrate them. So I would say pay attention to customer feedback and implement the channels that would really positively impact their experience so that we're delivering the experience that they want on the channel that they want to communicate on. That's very important.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, guys. Well, it looks like we are getting close to the end here. We did have another question come in, and please feel free to continue submitting as John and Doug respond. The question is, it's specific to the contact center. So I guess we'll come to you first, Doug. And the question is, what are the best methods for improving CX performance in the contact center?
So we've hit a lot of those here. And again, the North Star, I start with the North Star, helping us understand what winning looks like and making sure we have great alignment on that and how to get there and making sure we're really clear there. I think then it's about the process of transfer of knowledge. When you launch with someone in a contact center, we use a process, for example, as we onboard with new clients called Wave Zero. And we invest in, it's a foundational principle to invest in all of our management's ability to do this job that they're going to manage our agents doing. So Wave Zero puts all of our frontline managers, QA, support teams through training, including nesting, so they're dealing with interactions as well. It builds the foundational principles. We understand the business. We understand the North Star. We understand what great looks like. And I think that helps set us up for success. So as you're thinking about CX in the contact center with the BPO partners, it's a great way to start.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, guys, I want to thank you both for such a great conversation. Hopefully our audience got a lot of value out of it. For those of you who are attending your first ibex webinar, we hope to see you again. John, thank you so much for being our guest. And Doug, thank you as always. And everyone have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.